Mix. Dr. Doyo will be the moderator for this particular session. He's a man who is very well versed with issues curriculum, but is an ardent user of our products. So I know he's at home with this particular session. Dr. Doyo, take charge. Dr. Emojong is coming shortly.
Good afternoon once again.
Okay. We'll start with Rachel Nakitare. Rachel Nakitare is there virtually. And then from there, we'll move to Professor Murray, then Dr. Emojong.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. I think there's a bit of a mix-up because you've talked about curriculum. Ours was on public broadcasting. And I was hoping that maybe I think our colleagues, if my other colleagues are not on, we can wait until you get them. But ours was not on curriculum. I was on the panel that was talking about public broadcasting.
Yep. Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
I hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just go on with the presentation. It's on discussion on the dictum of public broadcasting under the presentation.
Okay.
Please. Go on.
Oh, okay. Sorry, then I didn't get, I thought it was a question and answer. So I was waiting for the questions. But anyway, I could just give a bit of an overview on public broadcasting. My impression was that we were 4 of us and that there was going to be a moderator that will be asking questions and then we answer. Okay. Okay, I can just give an overview and maybe when the questions come, we can answer if that's okay with you.
That's okay, Madam Rachel.
Okay.
Just an overview, then from the overview, the question and answer session will come in.
Okay, then maybe just to say, of course, broadcasting, public broadcasting has, especially in Kenya, has come a long way. And when you talk about the dictum of public broadcasting, what comes to mind is where is public broadcasting in our constitution or in our media as an industry. And of course, KBC as the public broadcaster in Kenya was established or is established under an act of parliament, CAP 221. And this was way back in 1989. So as you're talking about media in the 21st century, then you're thinking, you know, where did media all start? So when you talk about media, you're actually talking, in our context, you're talking KBC. And it just takes me back so many years, over 30 years, when I joined the industry, when all we had were big cameras. We had studios. If we had any cameras that went to the field, the electronic field gathering cameras were huge. The UHAs, the recorders that were used for radio were very big. In terms of information, getting information relayed maybe like from abroad to Kenya took 3 to 4 days because it came in through Telegram. And we're just talking about it the other day, and we're thinking, just visualizing how big and how huge those facilities used to be. Even in terms of storage, we started off with, the big quarter-inch and reel-to-reel tapes, moved into what we call U-matic, Betacam, DVCam. I'm sure the students that we are talking to today might only recognize DVCam as I come down that line. So it's been a long journey with a lot of transformation. But the role of the public broadcaster is very clear. It's anchored in the Constitution. When you talk about Articles 33, 34, and 35, and especially Article 35 that talks about access to information, then you're looking at the role of the public broadcaster. I think for me, the biggest difference between that role of the public broadcaster and maybe with the other private falls in the compulsory nature of the work that the public broadcaster has to perform. That it's not about commercial, it's not about where your preferred audiences are, but rather a responsibility and a duty to ensure that you reach all members of the public. It is mandatory that you reach every part of the public, and that's why I'm not sure, I've not followed what else you've talked about, but you must have been told that in terms of, for example, co-siting, in terms of the far-flung areas of the country, like Northeastern, like Turkana, and maybe even closer to you, if you check Nyamninia and Bondo and the others, you realize that the main transmitting stations are run by KBC, and the commercial stations would rather come and be hosted by KBC in an agreement that we call co-siting than have their own infrastructure, because it is a very expensive venture to get into. It would be very expensive for everybody to put up the kind of masks that we have. And of course, the things have changed a bit. There's a bit of, we're moving into fiber, but just in terms of the infrastructure alone, it would be very costly. So what are we saying are some of the challenges that the public broadcasters face? And I think I listened in just a bit when Dr. Mwangi was talking, and I remember him saying something about politics, political. One of the biggest challenges for the public broadcaster, and in our situation, is what I would call political dilemma. What I mean by political dilemma is that as our responsibility of the public broadcaster to ensure that they are churning out the information that is required by all the citizens, then you clearly must work with the government of the day to ensure that this information reaches every area of the republic. And in so doing, there's then the wrong perception that you cannot be apolitical, you cannot be objective. But it's not about objectivity, it's about ensuring that whatever, because it's the duty of the government to deliver services to the public. So it is the duty of the public broadcaster to ensure that this information gets to the public. So by disseminating that kind of information, then there is that misconception that then the public broadcaster is always the mouthpiece of the government of the day. But it actually needs to be understood that it is a responsibility for the public broadcaster to disseminate that information to the public. Having given you a bit, another challenge that I see is that what I call persistence of memory, and that also comes with the perception, because as you move, like I said, when I joined the industry, we only had the only media that we had in terms of broadcasting was KBC, and that is the public broadcaster. So as we continue to move and as media evolves, you're moving with your audiences. And so one of the challenges that the public broadcaster always faces is then trying to fight for appeal of the young audiences, because you're moving with your audiences and you're remaining true to your objective as a public broadcaster. So as you move along with the new audiences coming in, then you're always training to try to get to these new audiences. You find yourself in the middle of how do I keep the older generation moving and also ensure that I'm pulling in the new generation. For example, just the other day, we lost a media icon, Catherine Kasavuli. And I know a lot of the people within my age group and those who watched Kasavuli had gotten very excited when Kasavuli came back on the screens and followed even through the funeral. But using my own example, my children was not understanding. They could not resonate very well. Like it did make a lot of sense to them that everybody was celebrating Kasavuli and singing about her, because they just watched her the other day and they really did think she was what we were saying that she was. So that appeal of trying to ensure that you're cutting across generations and balancing becomes a bit of a challenge. The biggest challenge for any public broadcaster I know has always been finances, the costs of running the public service, the public broadcasting as a service, because like I said, you need to get to every part of the country. Not everybody wants to get there, so you are limited in terms of funds. And if you realize the funds allocated to public broadcasting continue diminishing, the allocation keeps getting smaller, it never gets bigger. If you've been following, you'll see that the BBC, for example, which has been the best model of a public broadcaster, has been talking about cutting down staff. And why? Because I think the UK is now where we must have been in the 1990s, where they're thinking, okay, is it viable to run a public broadcaster? Must we put in so much money? Should we also cut the licenses that the citizen pay that sustain the public broadcaster? Because, initially KBC used to be run by licenses that we used to pay for radio and television. Of course, during the Kibaki regime, that was cut. And so we are struggling. And so are many public broadcasters. Finance has been a big problem, trying to move, because they're usually part of the government system. Even procuring what I would call state-of-the-art facilities becomes a challenge, because, and technology is evolving very fast. So it becomes a challenge because you have to keep up going through the procurement processes. By the time you get to this equipment, people have already moved to the next one. And then of course competition that is coming in from the liberalization. We're moving away from storage of content in tangible gadgets like the tapes that I talked about, to the digital platforms. And there's a lot of competition too coming in from what I would call the media trends now in terms of broadcasting, and the Netflixes, what are they called? Mega media entities like MultiChoice, so that you actually, as a public broadcaster, focusing on ensuring that much as this content is moving very fast, you still have to archive it for posterity. And so how do you get there when you're trying to keep up with the modern trends of TikTok, with then our traditional ways of trying to ensure that we're keeping them, even if it's on hard drive. So I think costs coupled with the technology have been some of the challenges that a lot of the public broadcasters are dealing with. And then of course, an issue of trust, which we have already talked about. And then the issue of what I would call an aging workforce. And why do I call it that? I call it an aging workforce because the training that initially was given to especially the experts, the technical experts, has changed quite a great deal. And then that change or evolution on transition from the old broadcast systems to the current ones, which are actually enabling everybody. All of you can be broadcasters, using the YouTube channels and all the other available. So because of that transition is getting to a point where it's actually hard to access and to use the old content or the old facilities commercially well in this current time. Maybe just as opening, I don't know whether the other broadcasters are there or if you want to ask the questions in terms of public broadcasting, but Dr. those will be my opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Apparently, you're the only broadcaster presenting. You will field questions from our students and other participants around.
Okay.
But for that, to the audience, Madam Rachel Nakitare is a seasoned broadcaster. Could hear even from her presentation. She is currently at KBC. And again, she is in charge of female mentorship program that is sponsored by the American Embassy. And believe quite a number of you, really the students are aware of this particular program. So that means that for the female students, there are opportunities. You should get in touch with Madam Nakitare. Now, I want to get to we want to field now questions or get questions from the participants. Like was done in the previous session, we want to see who has a question or a comment. Oh, we have one over there. Another person? Any or two? Three, yes. Okay. So we'll take a few questions, maybe three or four, then a chance to respond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Nicholas Kiplangat, a fourth-year student, and my question goes to Rachel. If you check the state of KBC as we talk right now, it's far behind when you talk about the kind of maybe content they design and the followers, the kind of audience who still listen to KBC and everything that surrounds KBC. And this takes us down back to who feeds KBC. It's the government. He who feeds you will control you. And I think the kind of content that KBC sends back to the audience is determined by the person who funds them. That's the government. So to me, I'll not watch KBC because, of course, they'll not critique the government. They'll not stand out and tell us the government has done this and this. And I think that has been messing up with what is coming out of KBC. And is there a way that KBC can focus on advertisements and try to raise their own funds outside the government so that they may be independent and try to focus much on what is important to the audience and not what is important to the government? Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I can't hear you.
I'm Anthony Juma.
Kindly speak up, I can't hear you.
I'm Anthony Juma, a third-year student. My question also touches on adverts. We know that KBC is a public broadcaster, and so it is funded by the government, and therefore at times we don't expect them to have non-governmental adverts. But for some times we have been seeing those non-governmental adverts, like Vera Beauty College advert for some time. So my question is, has the government funding gone down that much that you are opting for non-governmental adverts?
My name is David Dorcas, a third-year student, and my question focuses on the viewership of KBC as a public broadcaster. We've seen it's so clear that today, you know, KBC being a public broadcaster, we expect it to have that a best, not even better, best viewership. But you talked about competition, and you said that one of the challenges that KBC as a public, let me not use KBC, public broadcasters are facing is competition. And you talked about, let me call it external, because you talked about Netflix. But it's clear again that today we face internal competition from other media, for example, media houses, maybe Royal Media, because if you see, for all of us who are here, if you see the viewership of Citizen TV, maybe KTN and KBC, you'll realize that Citizen is at the top and then KBC is at the bottom. So, and you know, it's been there since centuries and the viewership is declining. So what is your opinion about the future of KBC? Because, you know, viewership is everything for any media, for any TV station or media.
Hello, I'm Zahra Mohammed. You mentioned that a public broadcaster is the mouthpiece of the government of the day. So concerning that, how does KBC oversees its objectivity? And the second question, do Kenyans really value KBC as a reliable source of news and information? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Gital, and my question is on the audience. So we all know that communication is a two-way traffic, and my question is, what feedback mechanisms have you put in place to make sure that the voice of the audience is being heard, and also to assess how impactful your content is and evaluate the audience needs and wants? Thank you.
I think we can build the next. I'll take the next questions, the second round.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. So I can
We'll take your question. Then.
Oh, there's one. Okay.
Go on, Madam Nektari.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good
My
afternoon.
name is Masharia, fourth-year student. We understand that there are several communication agencies for the government. We have KBC, we have KNA. I would like to know, is there interdependence between the government communication agencies? Because at times we see KNA feeding other stations instead of feeding KBC only. Thank you.
Go on, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. I'll just get the questions in the order they came, starting with the Nicholas. Is there a way we can raise our own funds for adverts and focus on the people and not on government? I think that's why I started by explaining that the existence of a KBC is established in law under an act of parliament. And so it's hard to wish it away. It's like any other government parastatal or agent. It's not really up to us. It's not a commercial entity that you can set up today and decide it's not viable, it's not giving us enough money and close it. It is there by right, and it has a mandate. And the mandate is to ensure that Article 35 of the Constitution is adhered to in terms of every Kenyan accessing information that adds value to their life. So as it's run now, it's actually a hybrid. We have some commercial section and we have the public broadcasting section. I think what needs to be done is maybe a clear line so that we have a channel that is purely commercial and a channel that is purely public, maybe to draw that line. But because we use the same channels for both public and for commercial, then drawing the line becomes difficult, because yes, there are those programs that come in that are sponsored by advertisers and we run them. But I think what I was trying to say is that the bottom line is that we do not forget that every Kenyan has a right to access the information that is from government. That is why you might find KBC going for a program that will not look like, let me just, an example is even a parliament. KBC runs a parliament. Parliament is not very interesting to watch all the time, you know, like you don't watch it every day, but whenever there's an important debate, then whenever there's an important debate, then you see all the channels, all the private media houses then take the signal from KBC, because we cannot deny them that signal. It is in the interest of the public that the public follow what their representatives are doing or what their representatives are saying, or how legislation is being put up. So it's a thin line, but I think it's important for us to understand that it is a role that KBC cannot abdicate as a public broadcaster. So, like, we cannot say we will not do the public broadcasting role where we ensure we are taking you to Marsabit to show you the issues that are there, because you're not interested in Marsabit. It is their right as people or team or a part of this country to be given access and to be given a mouthpiece for them to speak so that the public knows what is happening in their area. But a private media house can decide that's not viable, it's not giving us any money, it's too expensive to go to Marsabit, we will not go. I think KBC does not have that liberty to do that. Anthony Juma asked, has government funding gone down for KBC? Yes, I think I said very clearly, and it's not just KBC, all public broadcasters. I think, unfortunately, broadcasting is important, and I think maybe there's need for legislators to be sensitized to realize that information is power, so that is given the priority that it requires. But I think world over, it's not, nobody thinks about information as a very basic need, but it is, so that if there are any budget cuts anywhere in the world, you'll find that one of the sections that suffers is actually usually the broadcasting one. And that's why I gave the example of what is happening even in BBC today. You know, you'll realize that they're struggling to survive because somebody feels maybe we just need to do away with this public broadcasting element because we are paying taxes for it, and let the commercial stations take over news. But if there was no public broadcaster, there'd be such a big gap then can you imagine a situation where all media go on strike, like they almost did in 2010 during the digital transition, and then there's completely this blackout of information in a country? How would that look? Because all those private media houses can do that, but KBC cannot, or rather any public media entity cannot do that. So you talked about Vera, you even mentioned Vera Beauty College. Vera Beauty College is, and that's where because of the dwindling resources in the market, I think media houses are struggling to survive and looking for sometimes ways of partnering. So Vera Beauty College may have run so many times as a news adjacency and you noticed it, but the reason is it was a partnership between KBC and Vera, so that Vera were taking care of all the needs of the corporation in terms of makeup. And so instead of giving them money, then it was a partnership. It's some kind of barter. So I think, and a lot of the media, not just public, are actually getting into partnerships where sometimes it becomes difficult. You give you barter so that you give airtime and you're given other services that keeps your entities running. Dorcas talked about internal competition. Yes, there is internal competition. And I said from the onset, since I think the 90s, 1990, 1991, when the airwaves were liberalized, there is a persistence of memory where KBC had been enjoying this monopoly for the longest time. And then now, of course, there's excitement about other stations coming in. And of course, as other stations come in, they take advantage of that liberty to go to extents that KBC cannot. For example, there's some programs we'll hear, and that's why like CA has come up with regulations on some of the issues, how stations should be run, talking about the watershed areas, watershed hours and others, because it was then very clear that as a public broadcaster, of course, you focus on national values, and you're guided by, very clearly guided by national values, even as you churn out content. The commercial stations will look at how they can excite the public and ensure that they get the most in terms of the commercials out of that. So because of that struggle, public broadcasts try to remain within their mandate as much as possible and do not get carried away because of what the commercial stations are doing. The other challenge I talked about, that the commercial stations are able to quickly work around and get good content immediately at the procurement processes. Public entities are guided by government procurement processes, which are very bureaucratic. It's not, KBC cannot stand today and just decide, we're going to put 1 million into this, we're going to buy this gadget because these youthful people need TikTok, and so we're going to invest in this, you know? A private station will just need the CEO's authority to use 10 million. She will decide, take that 10 million, go and buy an OB van and bring, because we need to compete. The OB van needs to get on the road. So because of those processes that are required, sometimes the public broadcasters would lag behind in terms of moving and acquiring what is required within the required time. And if we talk about technology, it's been evolving so fast that sometimes by the time you're getting into what you consider, by the time you're procuring what you have requisitioned for, people have already moved to the next level. That does not mean that you still can't be competitive. Now, some of the things that have held, for example, if I talk for KBC, that have held KBC behind is that there was so much invested in equipment. To get all those transmitters I've talked about overhauled and replaced by new is actually a lot of investment in terms of money. So the process becomes a little slower, to the extent that sometimes a product that has been produced with very high quality equipment, when it gets to transmission, may not have the same quality like it was produced. And so for a viewer, I've had a few times somebody telling me, I'm watching Parliament on Citizen and not on KBC, just because it's clear on Citizen. But yet that signal that Citizen is churning out is actually originating from KBC. So those are just some of the challenges that need to be worked out. And I think KBC is actually on the way of requesting Parliament to kind of relook at the act that established it and amend a few things just to allow it to be able to move in at the same speed that the commercial stations are moving. Zara asked if KBC can be objective enough. KBC, or rather, any public broadcaster should actually be objective. When you talk about objective, then I think we are talking about news in this case. And a lot of the times I've challenged people, and that's why I still call it biases or perceptions, that cannot be supported. Sometimes I'll ask, which item do you think has been carried by the private media houses in a more objective way than KBC has? In fact, going back to elections, which were just a few months ago, I can take you on to go and look at the items and the political items and how they were carried on KBC vis-a-vis carried on other media houses. Besides excitement of maybe because of what the politicians are saying, I think KBC is the only station that's remained extremely objective and balanced between the political parties, ensuring that all of them received equal airtime. All the 4 presidential contenders, we made sure that we went to where they were. We made sure that anytime you are carrying an item, even if it was live, it was going to cut across the 4 presidential candidates. So a lot of the times when you talk about objectivity is in the practice of journalism. And even all these journalists that have gone to work for, 3/4 of the journalists that have gone to work for private media houses actually worked or rather started at KBC. So I do not think that they were not objective at KBC, and when they get to the other media houses, they become objective. I think for me, it's perception. I would dare anybody to actually go and bring an item and tell me this item was carried more objectively on these media stations and not objectively enough on KBC. Deborah asks if we get feedback, if we assess impact, and if we get an evaluation of our audiences. Yes, we do. We've actually set out, I think that was done last year, for an independent one. But again, there is a very big issue, and I'm sure it has been discussed somewhere along this conference. How objective are those reports that you get out there? Because, and what somebody rightly said, whoever pays the piper determines the tune. So a lot of the reports that we get out there are at the request of a specific media house. So if you're sending out a firm to do research on the audiences and you're paying them, you really think they're coming to, they'll do a survey that shows that you're at the bottom of that matrix. And that's why there's a big issue within the media owners. I think if you realize for a long time now, there is no report that has been sanctioned or approved by all the media houses, because the media houses realize that there are biases based on who has employed or tasked the researcher to carry out the survey. So what they're doing is they're looking for a mechanism where there can be a kind of either a committee that is set up, established by all media houses to ensure that all the research that is done to assess the impact, to assess the audience analysis and everything that goes to ascertain which channels are being watched at what time and which content Kenyans want will be objective enough. So that is actually a work in progress. I think it's taken a long time because, again, it is not easy to agree. You know, everybody wants things done their way. And so it hasn't been easy among the media owners to agree on the way forward on that. Macharia asks about interdependence between KNA and KBC. Yes, initially, before the liberalization, it was all that the news that was gathered by the Kenya News Agency in the counties, or those days in the districts, was absorbed by KBC. But after the liberalization, KNA also wanted to survive. And so they said, we are not going to limit the information that we have specifically to KBC. So the information that comes out from KNA can actually be used by any of the media houses, because like I said, again, KNA is established by an act of parliament. So the information from the counties should reach as many people as possible. And so it's not limited, but yes, a lot of it, actually 3/4, almost 90% of the information that is carried, the work that is done by KNA is absorbed directly by KBC. I think that was the last question.
And from any comment or question from the virtual audience?
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
saw there's something that you sent, but I didn't read it. Huh? Maybe you can have it on again. Let me see. Let me check if there's anything in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, somebody is talking about one of the major challenges that the public broadcaster continues to face is leadership. And somebody else again says, and sensationalization of news. Yeah, KBC will not sensationalize, that I can tell you, and any public broadcaster will not sensationalize, because it is a service, not commercial to get money is coming in because of your sensationalizing. Okay, the comment about leadership, I don't think I want to comment on it. It's neither here nor there, but I think, for example, KBC is on track in terms of filling those gaps of leadership. I think mistakes that have been made have been corrected, and yeah, I think it's on track. That's all I can say. I wouldn't want to comment on leadership. It's not in my purview.
Can you take a few more questions?
Sure.
Thank you. Yes. Any questions? Yeah. Just let's take about 2 or 3 only.
Okay. Your mic is off.
Okay, sorry, I'm Cynthia Mudoro, and I'm just talking from a PR perspective. I think it's high time KBC should incorporate or try to do things in a different way, so that at least it can improve in terms of viewership. So how can you do, or what can you do to help us as upcoming journalists in the industry to unpackage this attitude and perception concerning KBC?
I'm Anthony Juma again. My question pertains football. That's KPL, Kenya Premier League. We know that DSTV left. It doesn't cover Kenya Premier League anymore. So my question was, why does KBC take a chance and cover KPL?
Yeah, the last one.
Thank you. My name is Elijah Chua for there. I have a question in perspective of the gender in journalism. What is your take on the relationship between the female and the male gender when it comes to broadcast? Thank you.
Okay, I think we are done.
Okay.
One more, please. One.
Okay, thank you. I still have a question concerning, if you check the current, there's a new introduction of a channel that focuses on county governments meetings, such that KBC will take their feed from the county now to the national broadcast. And my suggestion was, is it possible in that we develop those feeds such that the public can access those small, the information right from the county or right from the parliament, and not right from the national broadcaster, such that KBC can focus on what other media stations are doing? Because if you check even the last World Cup, it was free in KBC, but still people won't focus on the same, and it is something that is free. Is it that KBC was misused back in the history, in that the perception is still instilled in people's mind and can't change their perception concerning KBC? So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Just for gender. The balance, just one more.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Cynthia. Well, I have a concern.
Yeah.
I have a concern on one of the challenges you pointed out of trying to ensure that you appeal to younger audiences. Well, as a young person, I think most of us will go to where the hype is, where we have the most celebrated entertainment host. Maybe I can point out names like maybe Willis Raburu or something. Yeah. So why is it that KBC does not focus on maybe poaching the big names and creating more engaging content for the youth? Sometimes the content is boring. That's why most of the youth will go. I don't mean to say that in a bad way, but most of us would go to where the hype is. So we need to see KBC doing more of that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. I think yours is about poaching, even the last question and even the first question. What can we do differently? Like I said, it's really a question of perception. And again, I would just request that you take your time, as journalism students who are out for value and looking at things more objectively, to just take time, even just 2 days, to run through the schedules or the content, and especially of news, because that's really what you're training to do before when we get into other content content on TV and on radio, and tell me what is covered differently. Because if I actually was to take stock of, I wish I'd carried the roster to show you, KBC carries more stories than any other media house. A media house will have an interview of one of those big guys for about 10 minutes. KBC will carry for you within that time another 4 or 5 stories. So is it that the public is just interested in sensationalism and in listening to politics, or are they interested in quality news? Because that is done deliberately, and because we ensure that at least the whole country is covered, we try to get bits and pieces from everywhere. So the biggest challenge has been perception, and I think we're just trying to work around it. Maybe to tie that on to your last question, Cynthia, is that poaching is neither here nor there, because you poach somebody. There's the famous phrase that goes with greener pastures. When you're poaching people, then of course they're coming, you're giving them something better than what they were receiving. Because we are tied, I will tell you that in the private, and when you get into practice, you'll realize that in the private media stations, you will bargain about your salary based on maybe your experience and be paid based on your experience. And there's no scale set for everybody where people at this level get this and the others at this. But KBC is a government institution that is guided by structures. Even if we wanted to pay people 5 shillings more, we'll need to take it back to Sarah Sarem committee. Sorry, I'm forgetting whoever is there now, but it is not the Salaries and Remuneration Commission to be able to be given approval for us to make that increment. So it is not that KBC does not want to poach, but it cannot, because you cannot be calling somebody to give them lesser salary than what they're getting. So that's why it's been easier for the private media houses to poach from KBC, because they know the scales, they add you a few coins, and you're happy to move because there's been an increment. So and that's why I talked earlier on and said, maybe if Parliament can look at that act again, and maybe promote this the bracket, the position, because parastatals are grouped in certain categories. So unless that is done, so that KBC is elevated to the next level, which can only be done by Parliament, it cannot, it's not up to us. And I think all the things that you're saying are actually around perception. Elijah added the thing about allowing the county governments to do their bit and letting the national broadcaster do its bit. All that is constitutional. By the way, we have to go around, like now we're thinking, we actually coming up with the county TV, because all the counties want the county proceedings carried the way the National Assembly proceedings are carried. But the act does not allow, the law does not allow counties to set up their own stations, because of course that would be another political story that we'll be getting into. So KBC is actually coming up with a county, will run the county TV for all the counties. So much as we have vernacular stations that also try to carry the information from the counties and speak in a language that people understand, it has become important, or it is actually imperative for KBC then to also ensure that we have all those channels that have languages that speak directly to the citizen in the languages that they understand. So it is a question of perception, but again, I think the content is even if you wanted to, you choose to go for the smaller stations because they're best in the counties. If you realize a lot of those sometimes will register as community stations, but when they come to practice, they turn themselves into commercial stations, because which is an illegality, but you know, that's again a discussion for another day. So it's not easy. It's not, they may want to, you can choose what you want to watch, but I think KBC's mandate is very clear in terms of they being the only ones who can actually transmit from the counties and also from the National Assembly. Premier League, it's a very good idea and anybody would love, because sports, besides being loved by everybody, is a big unifier. But sports, and you can do your research, has become some of the most expensive content the world over. Long time ago, we used to have the World Cup you're talking about is not free anymore. Long time ago, we used to have it free. Now we have agencies that kind of buy the rights to sports. Sports has actually become a business. So getting into even recording or relaying Kenya Premier League live is not entirely, like if KBC was just told to relay, we'd definitely just go to the field and put our cameras there and get the ball to the Kenyans. But Kenya Premier League want rights and they want money for anybody to be able to broadcast. So you start looking at it in terms of money, and with the kind of money that is coming in, then it doesn't become a priority, because the monies that they are putting out there are way too expensive. And that's why you've actually seen no media house go for it, because you look at what you're being given, you look at the prospects that can be brought in, and this is an expensive venture where you have to go to the field and go to different towns all the time, then it doesn't make economic sense. So that is the reason that you haven't seen it in any of those. You will see people going for EPL. It is not that cheap. It is actually very expensive. And I can tell you for a fact, nobody's recouping those costs. It's just that it gives you the profile that you want. And then of course, everybody says, because this, whatever brings us EPL, well, it's a good channel, and so we'll watch it. But none of the media houses that have engaged in EPL in this country have recouped the kind of money that they've put in. Then I think that was the last, the gender. There was something on gender. Yes, gender is my pet subject, so I'll talk about it forever. I will just scratch on top that gender is a big issue in journalism. Of course, is now a constitutional requirement of the 2/3 gender. It applies across media. I think the challenge that we are facing, and I talk from a gender perspective now, is that I don't know how many ladies are in your class of journalism and how many men, but by the time we get to the middle level of the practice of journalism, a lot of the ladies have dropped off. If they haven't gone into PR, some even just get into business and drop off. So we are finding that there's a lot of challenges that especially the female gender face when they get into practice, into the newsrooms. And that is something we're trying to work on with some, of course, with Dr. Nyambuga very closely in Maseno and other universities to see how to better equip the female journalists for the what I would call the adversaries or the challenges that they face when they come to practice. Big on the agenda has been discrimination, issues of sexual harassment, and the perceptions we are talking about that women are not able to do this, they can only do this, so being given softer beats. But I think that is being addressed. But from where I sit, there's really no issue about gender. Journalism is a profession that can be practiced by both male and female comfortably, and so I encourage both the male and female gender just to take up whatever the journalism they want to take on, just be focused on the niche that they want to carve out for themselves and pursue it like nothing is impossible. I think I'm done, Dr.
Thank you so much, Madam Mwakitare. For now, we'll release you, but I have to say this on behalf of the audience that we are very grateful that you spared the time to join us in the middle of your busy schedule. Thank you so much. I would also like to inform the audience that the KBC of today is quite different from KBC of the 90s. Probably you are not there in the 90s, but the KBC of today is quite different. They are trying. Thank you so much, Madam Rachel Mwakitare.
Asante sana, my pleasure. You continue and enjoy the conference.
Thank you. Now, I want us to move to the next session before we take a break. That is curriculum. And we have two presenters, Professor Makuchieng will present his piece first. Then we'll move to the next presenter, that is Dr. Emojong. Prof, I don't need to introduce Prof because he was here yesterday. He was introduced elaborately. I don't think I can introduce him better than he was introduced yesterday. Thank you, Prof.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, you'll have to put up with my voice. It is struggling for reasons which I cannot manage at the moment. So, but I guess I'll do okay. Now, my topic is on curriculum, and Dr. has said that Dr. Jamong is going to be also on curriculum, but no, that is not true. I wish to make the following statements regarding curriculum, journalistic training, and the future of journalism. We live in a country where training and curriculum development is fairly regulated. But there is an extent to which probably that regulation is not working very well. Looking at the future would be so important if we see the future based on the reality of today. Of course, later on, I'm going to be making comments about the technological revolution that we've gone through, landing us in a digital world, which has made certain demands on us. But going back to what I wanted to say, journalism, if done well, is so beneficial to society that we should also, all of us, be concerned about the quality of the curricula that we have. Of course, there is training later on. Training is based on curriculum. And the key questions being that, are we currently preparing students well for the world in which we live and the world that is coming? Now that question becomes very interesting because so many institutions in this country do not have good curriculum. and I know for a fact because I've been involved in this for a very long time. As a curriculum developer, I've developed so many, right from TVET level up to the university level. I've taught in this area for a long time, but also done work for the Commission for University Education that really assesses and approves curriculum. And it's tragic because we have thousands and thousands of students going through journalism training. And the training that they're being given, in my opinion, is so poor that if you knew better, you would actually scream and pull your hair. And there are so many contributing factors that we can talk about, later on. And therefore, it becomes important for me just to make that opening remark. I'm going to be making specific remarks regarding certain institutions, probably even yours. You can see my friend, your leader, is here. But I'll say what I think is very truthful. UNESCO has got this program that is trying really to impact on training in journalism, and I'm very glad that I'm here. And I've really enjoyed my time here, interacted with people, both from UNESCO and other institutions. Yesterday, I think there was the issue we discussed regarding journalism. Is it a profession? And there was a professor from South Africa saying that it is a practice. By the way, there are people who actually say journalism is a philosophy. So is it a profession? Is it a practice? Is it just a philosophy? Why I'm emphasizing UNESCO is because since the year 19 in the 50s, they already started a process of trying to ensure that globally, training in journalism really speaks to a profession. In fact, for them, and I'm going to be making reference to that, they refer to journalism as a profession. The skills that you train in order for you to practice as a journalist are actually professional skills. Some of them are technical skills, but very fundamentally, there are professional skills there. Why am I emphasizing UNESCO, and especially the year 1958? That is almost 70 years ago. They came up with the first document that was born out of the putting together internationally of scholars, practitioners, and regulators. And they gave them around about 2 years leading to 1958. And that body then came up, to my knowledge, the very first document that speaks to the training of journalists. Why I emphasize that here is because the document they came up with made reference to technological revolution. And just consider this. And the technological revolution at that particular time was the coming in of television, radio, television, and then, film. And it was like, oh, the world has changed so drastically. We need to know how to deal with it. Fast forward 70 years later, 2023, we are talking about technological revolution. My emphasis is when we look at technology in relation to journalism, as I said yesterday, technology is extremely important because as an enabler, it actually, to a great extent, influences and affects what journalists can do. But essentially, and that document spelled this out very clearly, journalism is journalism, and it should continue as journalism, but practice on various platforms. And when those technological revolutions take place, usually the question is, how then do you still carry the fundamentals of journalism, but enable students to acquire the kind of skills that they need to practice journalism in a changing technological environment? So going back to this document that came out in 1958, we struggled yesterday with definition of journalism, and I know there is contention there. And for students who later on will become academics, there is what we refer to as conceptual explication, trying to make the meaning of concepts coming out so clearly that it becomes possible and easily for you to be able to see in real life what it refers to. And therefore, definitions are important, even when we don't agree sometimes exactly on the dimensions of definitions. Already in 1958, a group of scholars said this, that journalism at that time of today is an exacting call whose main goal is to gather, present, and interpret the news by whatever medium. I emphasize this because I said, let us not define journalism solely by reference to technology. They said by whatever medium. And it demands not only high technical skill to match the great strides made in the mechanics of communication, but also the ability to understand and make understandable to others the swiftly changing and complex panorama of modern times. If there was a complex, fast-changing reality in 1958, what is it that you're dealing with right now? Just hand picture that. They didn't have internet, they didn't have mobile phone, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. No, they didn't. But already they were concerned about that. So the emphasis I'm trying to make here, journalism is in the business of information, informing people to live a better life, for them to be aware of what is happening about them, but informing them in such a way that they can deal with the complexities of their lives from a position of understanding. From a position of understanding. And I want to emphasize this because in our training, even when we are concerned about technology, there are those skills that are so important in making meaning and explaining that we need to work on. And especially because we've got students in the audience, it will be a contradiction. It will be a contradiction that one will ask questions, get answers, not interrogate the answers, and write as if one is not using their intellectual, skills. The importance of journalism is both at the individual level, the macro level, and also at the meso level, the societal level, the macro level. And what I'm saying is that we have currently technology that has made people who do not use their faculties well think that that technology can only be mobilized and used at the micro level. You know, you're doing things, you're laughing and so on and so forth, while you are sitting. And sometimes most of you are carrying extremely powerful technology. I remember when I first used a computer and people were talking about the mainframe computers, huge, you know, in academic institutions, for research institutions. And those computers couldn't do even 1/10 or 1/20 of what your mobile phone can do right now. And that as a student training to be a journalist and being curious, wanting to understand your environment so that you can inform people based on verifiable information, interrogate and engage with that information, and explain to them the implications of that information for their lives. So those skills require that we think. So journalism as a profession is very much captured by that definition that I've just given. To gather, present, and interpret. Gather, present, and interpret the news by whatever medium, using not only high technical skill, and I want to emphasize high technical skill, but also your intellectual faculty. Now, I want to get to probably something that I think may be a bit controversial. If this is what journalism is, to what extent can we say that the curricula that we have in universities prepares students to end up qualifying as journalists? And I've got questions myself. Sometimes I wonder, but ultimately when you go out there, your prospective employer will be expecting somebody who is both a thinker, but also quite good with the technical. But most of you know, I don't know whether you've known this, that there have been conversations in this country where certain employers say in public that some of the students that graduate, if not most, are not equipped, you know, for the job market. So for me, curriculum has got to speak to that. Of course, later on, the implementation of that curriculum is also important. But what is it that one should focus on when training journalists of today and the journalists of tomorrow? And I can tell you this, and I hope somebody can organize a meeting for us to discuss this. My hunch, and that hunch is based on experience, probably 50% of public universities are not doing this. Sounds controversial. Sounds controversial. Maybe 50% of universities are actually not doing this. Now, why? Because of the type of curricula developed sometimes out of desperation for faculty. American word for, you know, lecturers to continue having employment and to, you know, survive. Where you find in a curriculum, I try to count, and I'm going to be speaking to this, UNESCO suggested, and of course theirs was a suggestion based on the model that they'd worked on. One of the documents that came later on in 2007, after the original intervention that came in 1958. And they provided 3 pillars in journalistic training. Number 1, emphasizing the technical expertise, skills. And number two, emphasizing journalistic knowledge, putting those skills in context of journalism. And number three, emphasizing general knowledge. You know, Americans refer to liberal, education or arts. So you take a curriculum and you ask yourself, first of all, if this is it, and I assume that this is going to be implemented effectively, will it result in producing a journalist who is able to deal with the current challenges in the future? And I will tell you 50%, I would say. Why? Because it requires deep knowledge of where we come from as students of journalism, to identify those strong areas, those key fundamental areas, and therefore use that understanding and translate it into curricula. Because if you come with a curricula and you haven't done your work effectively, then that curricula may not actually reflect what is what. You may agree or disagree with UNESCO, and I'm going to be referring to what they propose, but that is what my own feeling was. I've given an example many times of having somebody close to me, a relative, going to university, public university, coming home and visiting, sat the person down, and I felt like crying. Yes, somebody who's gone through 3 years, I've got 1 year to go, and you interrogate and you feel like, honestly, what were you doing? How do you deal with that? There are institutions, and I'm going to be referring to some of them, here, that you can look at their curricula and have a sense that these key pillars have actually been taken care of. Because even as technology changes, and sometimes we train students, they come out and they go to the newsrooms, and I'll be talking about this later on, that in the technological world of today, the practice of journalism is not restricted to newsroom. We've had this conversation for a long time. Things are changing so fast that you can practice journalism without being in the newsroom. But even when you encounter technology that is so sophisticated, if you are solidly grounded in the basics, even your prospective employers will see. They'll see the potential. And the basics of technology, really, they're just the basics. The very sophisticated one, you can take a month or two and you'll be able to be good to go. And this is where now I'll make reference to my personal experience, that the journey I've had in academia. So when I went to Multimedia University after working at USIU for some time, and I'll make reference to that, I've come across very disturbing realities in life in this training, where you have a school of journalism or a department of journalism, and in there they're teaching public relations, and the demarcations in the communication field cannot be seen very clearly in some institutions. While we could excuse that a long time ago, we can't excuse that right now. But when I went to Multimedia University and later on was involved in curriculum development, and I wish to say that I was very lucky because, I had to work, and I worked with colleagues that were really very good, very good. In a situation where, as far as technical training, I think we are privileged. So in terms of what would go into it, from the perspective of staff, it helped quite a bit, because these are people who are in the media, people who are in academics, and so on and so forth. And when we became a university college, we had inherited curriculum from JKUAT. I looked at the curriculum, I almost cried. I said, I can't wait for the day when this curriculum will stop being offered here. And please don't report me. Now, what happened is that we sat with the colleagues and we did benchmarking, and the UNESCO documents were some of the reference, points, to the extent that we came up with, I think in this country, probably the first undergraduate degree whose name bore journalism, bachelor's degree in journalism. And there are many times when, and I hope my colleagues here will just understand the context from which I'm saying this. There are many times when I looked at our curriculum and I said, oh, I think this is the best in the country. Okay, maybe because it was ours, I had the latitude to think like that. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that the work that goes into developing that curricula should be informed and usually benefits from the crop of people that are involved in developing it. And therefore, the three pillars, we very seriously adhered to them. I'm not saying that this is probably the magic one. So when you go to an institution, and some of them are public, and you get 2 or 3 people and most of them come from backgrounds that may not be particularly communication related, and they're struggling with communication programs, and they're teaching students, very much like the blind person leading a blind person, and you end up getting a degree. It's problematic. It's problematic. So we developed that program. It came out and we started implementing it. Extremely successful. And there are quite a number of institutions with similar programs. But why I'm saying this, and I want to emphasize this again, my thinking also is that when somebody talks about technological developments and also the development of the field and the profession of journalism, there is a place where journalism has come. There is a place where journalism is. And sometimes nomenclature is so important. And for me, I would emphasize, and I hope colleagues will agree with me. I think a time has come when one should have a standalone program in journalism. Why? Because the nomenclature and where you place a program is extremely important. And sometimes it's got an indirect effect on the students that are being trained. So we have a program. We've had it for a very long time. Now, in terms of equipment, because curricula not supported by reasonable equipment, it doesn't have to be extremely expensive and complex, but just to enable students to get exposed to, familiar with, acquire skills, to gather, process, and deliver information is important. Where I'm emphasizing is that we have institutions, probably part of the 50%, where that is not available. Completely, until today, not available. And the case I was referring to illustrated that. A student majoring in, remember yesterday we spoke about specialization. I think we better talk about majoring or concentration in broadcast media. They have never seen any, even the smallest equipment that you can use to record voice and whatever. They asked, what about the editing suits? What are you talking about? So curricula is as good as delivery and the resources that support that. if the definition spoke about high skills, both in technological ability to use technology, that is, and the critical thinking supported by very sound general knowledge in various areas. In fact, by the way, one of UNESCO's suggestion is that around about 30–40% of the content of a curricula should come from areas not related to journalism. And I agree. And that one, I think I've got questions whether our program satisfies that. And from the discussions we've had here, if you were to enable a student to be able to reflect on certain issues, explain those issues to the readers, viewers, audiences, and those issues basically come from human experience outside journalism, and they don't have courses in economics, they don't have courses in psychology, they don't have courses in whatever it is that gives them the foundational information for them to be critical about it. Then there's a problem there. Because if I wanted to give you an assignment right now to talk about climate change, my assumption is that either you already have, but you're going to be looking for information about climate change. Because how else then would you be able, if you don't, to actually explain or report in a way so that you are credible? That one you can only get from outside, so that these three pillars come together. So my argument is that if institutions are struggling, and of course, in one way or the other, education has become massified and so on and so forth. It is only those students who can demonstrate mastery in those three areas that are going to be succeeding. The beautiful thing for us, and this I think is quite positive, is that if you're a student who is proactive, open-minded, looking at this technology as such a powerful resource, then you can use the internet, for instance, and read and educate yourself. I want to go back now and focus on matters technology and the prospects. And I'm grateful that my other colleagues mentioned and talked about this, Dr. Mulwa, Dr. Mwangi. The possibilities open by technology. And during our small breaks, we have shared experiences. I had a colleague when I worked in South Africa. Young lady, right now, she's a professor in the UK. And one day we were talking and she told me, Murej, yes, I went for a holiday last month. And you know what? We went all the way to the US and went into a cruise ship. And I'm feeling like, it sounds like you are in the movies. And I wondered, how was that possible? Because I thought she didn't, probably from her salary, have that kind of money. But apart from being a lecturer, she was actually practicing journalism. She wrote stories, but mainly targeting the international media, space. And what she would do is that, based on her own skills, she would do research on the internet, because she wrote mainly about technology and the way technology is transforming society. And then she would prospect, and make suggestions to magazines, newspapers, whatnot, about her story ideas. And she would write, and she was paid in dollars. She was able to do that. So it is true what my colleagues were saying, that technology now, for those who think creatively, brings possibilities. But you are better off when you exploit that technology journalistically. Meaning that you are very keen, first of all, on getting verifiable, detailed, comprehensive information. Because a lot of those people who take quality seriously wouldn't take very kindly if you can't give them something that is good. So it is possible that if you are able to master the skills and you push yourself, your limitation will be your imagination and how quickly you turn that imagination into action. Because there are people who are doing that. And Dr. Mulu gave us examples, Kenyans who are doing that. Another thing that is happening right now is that people are organizing themselves. Young people all over the world organizing themselves. 2, 3, 4 people come together, almost like a small, medium, and enterprise, whatever, in journalism, you know. And they can source information knowing that there is a market out there. Of course, you look for the market. And they target those markets. And they get money. If just simple writing of assignments is given as a bad name, Kenyans, for those rich UK people can earn Kenyan young people money. Why wouldn't somebody who is properly trained use that training to actually make that? But more importantly for me is that you need to use those skills, yes, to get money, but also to advance the aims of journalism. Yesterday we spoke about everybody being able to send Twitter, I don't know what else, and so forth. For some people, that is journalism. I disagree. These are journalists, they're journalists. No, everybody can be a journalist. No. Disseminating information does not qualify somebody to be a journalist. Even if they had 100 million followers. When the rubber hits the road, and it has done that so many times for some of us, where you are sitting in a group of people and they're consuming very clearly fabricated information, and they are in fact acting on it, sometimes to the detriment of their own lives. I can't call that journalism. So what I'm saying is that your skills then become extremely important, because in this technological reality, more than it was before, journalism practice as journalism extremely important, because then you'll be targeting, giving people information that they can use, but that information should be healthy, should be profound, should be comprehensive, should be verified. Then apart from just making money, you're using journalism to do what journalism was meant: inform, to empower, and improve people's lives. And if you marry the two, because making money is not a sin, if you marry the two, you'll actually go very far. And my concluding remarks, coming back to curriculum, I just want to give you a few examples here, is that I think a time has come in this country, and I think my colleagues have agreed with me, we wish to thank UNESCO very much, that we need to, as trainers, probably talk more, collaborate more, because all these people who are being trained in journalism are Kenyans. They have a good education that prepares them for life. And sometimes working in silos may not be very, very useful. So I'm actually doing, some research, and this is probably in the very early stages of looking at, at curriculum. Let me just share with you very quickly. For instance, at multimedia, and you may make an assessment regarding this. In the Faculty of Media and Communication, we have what we call the faculty core courses. This is supposed to ensure that every person who gets trained in the faculty, regardless of the majors that they are taking or the areas of journalism that they wish to get a degree in, must do these courses. And you'll be surprised. At both the first and second year, these courses are such that if, like we were saying yesterday, you reach third year and you feel like, what I wanted to do in third year, I've changed my mind, your back is covered. And it makes sure that a student gets the basics in various parts of communication that actually they can build on and have a career in. 14 units across the board students have got to do. And then we have 11 journalism core courses. And by the way, when you read the UNESCO model curricula, a course like writing and reporting news, according to the suggestion, is not a one-off course. The suggestion is the introductory writing and reporting for news. There is intermediate writing and reporting for news. There is the third one, writing and reporting for news, because these are the skills that speak to what you are going to do there. So you better get a good dose, of it. And then those who specialize in quotes, meaning taking a major in or concentrating in broadcast journalism, then take an extra 12 units. So you have 14, 11, 12. Those who then go to do print journalism will take another very specialized 12 courses, plus electives. But of course, now I'm wondering whether we've got a good dose. I look at the details, whether we've got a good dose of the general knowledge coming from other fields. And that probably we need to work on. Then I looked at another university. Probably it may not be good for me to name them right now, but one of them was Maseno. And not just because Maseno people are my friends, but a fairly good, program, especially when it comes to issues of skills, skills-related courses, very well, even theory. I made an observation here that for a very long time I've wondered about this with technology thing and with technology. Everything is with technology in the world of today, even literature with technology. So in the for branding purposes and with technology, I said, okay, no sour. But looking at the details of the courses, but then I wondered, and this I need to share with colleagues now, going forward, if what I've said is true, that many of you, and by the way, sometimes I talk with students and they get a bit surprised.
it is good to be very forthright. And it's a hard reality that looking at the media houses that we have in this country, there is no way even a 10% of the students that we graduate are going to be employed by them. There is no way. And sometimes students should think very, very creatively. If you just think that your languages are English and Kiswahili, there's a lot more opportunities in vernacular and language radio stations, for instance. So think along those lines. So if we accept the fact that there are not enough opportunities out there, what I'm asking myself and my colleagues, how is our curriculum taking care of these technological changes? That's a big question. Because I look at the one that we have at Multimedia, and I'm talking about Maseno right now, there is need then to say, we had a conversation, Dr. Mulo said this and this and this is possible. Is it possible that now is the time for us to think about responding to this technological change and saying, now can we prepare students? And what curriculum do we need to actually do that? If people have short movies using mobile phone, they have. If you can do your research, serious research, using this, if you can take pictures using this, if you can record video up to 4K using this, honestly, and you heard Madam Nakitare saying they struggled with cameras that you needed to eat ugali very well for you to carry them. Now you're carrying this. How then do we enable you to think, to believe, and actually do it, that you can do all those things, using it? So in terms of the curriculum challenges, that is what I can say. Number two, and this is something that I've organized over a long time, and I speak about it to young people a lot. Your ability to access this technology means that if you have that idea, now I want to call it ideology of journalism, you have accepted, internalized the values of being proactive, of pushing boundaries, of looking for information, and making yourself better at what you're doing all the time, then I can say the second thing is that we need to develop courses, probably more of them. We have now the critical thinking and whatnot, but we need to push in such a way that you can actually do it. You don't need to wait for a teacher if you have a good computer. You have InDesign and learn by yourself and so on and so forth. How you package and whatever and so on, the lecturers can come in. But we need students who don't sleep 10 hours, walk around another 4 hours, go to classes less, and then they go to sleep. The training in journalism should predispose you to have this thing, and almost you're wondering, will I have enough time to do that? So your creative thinking and critical thinking, that we need to develop, because there are certain things students struggle with, but if they had that push, that realization, they can actually learn and teach themselves, so that you complement what your lecturer does. So technology, very important, you can use it, but are you creative enough? Are you proactive enough to translate this into that? Because if people like Churchill can tell you how they learned how to write using a typewriter, most of you will just laugh and be like, "Oh, can we make a movie? Can we make a movie? This sounds quite interesting." If they did it, why not? The last thing that I want to say is emphasizing in our curricula, one of the cardinal goals of journalism. And that is being critical in terms of safeguarding and promoting what usually is referred to the public interest. And therefore having students, and most of them in universities, who don't care a hoot about developments taking place there, and then they want to be journalists. I think you should make it a requirement that in our training and our assessment, if you cannot demonstrate the fact that you know what this word Maseno is sitting on and who the MCA is. Do you know? Do you actually know who is your MCA? Okay, university. They may sound like very simple questions, but you know, there are times when, for instance, at the University of Nairobi, if you are going to fight for a slot to do the postgraduate diploma in journalism, if you didn't know that, forget it, just go home, because they'll take you through very rigorous interview, trying to see what kind of person is this? Is it a pretender, dreaming, or this is the person who is ready to actually go? Because the complex society we live in right now, and Kenya being what Kenya is, really for you to be a good journalist, the basic thing is that you need to be concerned about those things that concern Kenyans and go into them and be able to talk about them comprehensively. Because otherwise you'll be cheating yourself. You'll be cheating yourself. So that knowledge base is extremely important. And my question is, to what extent is our curriculum talking to that? I've been external examiner for a number of universities. Apart from the fact that I cry when I look at papers, you know, sometimes students can make you cry. They can make you cry. You are struggling to read, you are struggling to follow, and you are thinking, now this young person needs to have a future. You don't know what they are saying, and so on and so forth. You know, they can make you cry. But you see, a journalism student shouldn't make you cry. Should make you feel like, let me grab my mug of coffee. This is interesting. I can read for the whole night, you know, because these are good students. And by the way, I've come across that. So push yourself, because the responsibility you have as a journalist, informed by the values of journalism, requires that you care for this country. You write, inform, comment in such a way that sometimes you speak to power, and that you demand that people attend to those things that are affecting our society. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. You heard Prof struggling to use the word specialization. I think we need to rethink that as curriculum developers, and probably adopt the term, say, majoring or concentration. So personally, from today onwards, I'm not going to use the term specialization. I want us to have the next presentation before we take a break, because they are closely linked. And I think Dr. Emujong will take us through the next presentation. Remember that Prof said that we need to ensure that our programs are well designed to equip students with skills to enable them face challenges in the field of journalism. And at the same time, that we need to have programs that can enable students or be curious enough to understand the environment, and probably and other issues related thereto. Those who can gather information, present the same, for the common interest of the public. Let me call upon Dr. Emujong, the head of media, sorry, communication, and Dr. Emujong, sorry. Let me get the correct term so that I don't create my own department. Because the communication and media technology. Sorry. Yeah. So, Dr. Emujong, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by confessing that I've read the mood in the room, and therefore I'll be very brief. Be very brief. Allow me to share with you on this interesting subject of fake news and infodemics. Fake news and infodemics. As journalists, we all understand and appreciate that fake news is all around us. Journalists have been accused of sharing fake news. First question is, what is fake news? Fake news simply unverified and inaccurate information. This term fake news was popularized by the former president of the United States when he discredited international media. Why should fake news be concerned to journalists and you trainees? Why should we be bothered by fake news? We've been trained that journalists should share accurate information. During this COVID-19 epidemic, we've been hearing terminology such as infodemics. Infodemics is just information and epidemic. And why should it concern us? When you share a lot of fake news, you're creating problems to your audience. We are not able to tell. You're creating a difficult situation, a challenging situation. You're causing fear. If I may just share my personal experience and what fake news can do. 2 years ago, I believe it was in 2020, when we were at the peak of COVID-19. And we're being told of several variants of this virus. And some of you know that even in our own university and our own department of communication and media technology, we had some members of the faculty, including you as truly, who got this thing. And the experience was not that nice even to share. Because you can imagine you're in isolation, you don't know what to do. You have to hold your gadget, search for information. Different shades of information. What you should eat, what you should not do, exercise, sijui inhale a lot of fume, take a lot of ginger, lemon, all this concoction. Truly speaking, I got from social media. Because you are desperate. You are desperate. You need information. As a victim, I could not tell what is accurate information from what was inaccurate. So some people are spreading all this. So we were suffering by then because of fake news and also infodemics. Because of time, I've always asked myself, why do people share inaccurate information? And this week, I came across an analysis of several studies done on the motivation behind sharing fake news. And allow me to share with you some of these findings. The outstanding one was awareness, knowledge, and media health literacy. Then secondly is you just share fake news without expecting any reward. Any reward. The people I see before me, people seated before me, I believe, being a techno-savvy, I believe you must have shared information that you have not verified. If at all you have been a victim, just because you've seen this information, you've not verified, you've not determined the accuracy of this information, then you've been promoting and circulating fake news. During the COVID-19, Media Council of Kenya, via the coordinator for the Lake region, raised an issue with our Equator Radio that one presenter was giving our audience unverified information. I don't know what it was, but that one came to our attention. And when we asked this presenter the source of this information, he cited social media. He cited social media. Then the question is, are our trainees, are our journalists competent or trained on verification of this information? Are you able to detect what is accurate from inaccurate? How do you detect this information? Professor Mrej has just spoken to us. And I wish you could also tell us, given this technology, the changing terrain, how in terms of information sourcing, how critical information verification is, that you need the skill. What is this? What are these skills? Don't just share. Don't just get this information. Ask yourself, who is the source of this information? Who is the source of this information that I'm about to share? What is the source of this information? 2, where did it come from? It might have come from your colleague. That does not mean it is authentic. Is this person an expert? Why are you sharing this information should be the third question. Why are you sharing it? Ask yourself, when was it published? We've seen instances whereby people give you data that is not even recent. An incident that happened many years ago. Somebody tells you this is what just happened a few minutes ago. Ask yourself, when was it published? It is important that fact-checking be part of us as a skill, so that we give factual information, especially now with the advancement in technology. How do we fight fake information, especially during crisis moments such as epidemic? I'll just summarize that. Number one, what you should do is get ahead of the narrative. You cannot kill the narrative, just be ahead of the narrative. If you remember, during the peak of COVID, I think it is Media Council, conjunction, I think with UNESCO, that came up with the information hub so that journalists could query, could get accurate information about COVID-19. That was a step. That was a step. So for us, during epidemics or crisis moments, we should always know where are these sources of fake information or misinformation. Then we face it head on. Having said that, I read the mood. Allow me to stop there.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Majong. Now, yes, we have only about 10 minutes before we break for lunch. So can we take a few questions very quickly? Yes, there is someone over there. We want to have new people now. Not those who have been asking questions since morning, yes. So whoever is holding the microphone, please ensure that you identify new people, but we are not stopping others also from making comments and asking questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my question goes direct to Professor.
Your name, identify yourself.
Betwe Kesa, a fourth year. Now, having talked about specialization since yesterday, and we've been told that as journalists, we should be all-round journalists. We should be in print, electronic, and if you can, in PR. And you've also said that our universities have different curriculums. Now my question is, what education strategies should be adopted to train journalists to make them meet the market? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kahiro John, a third-year student of media. My question relates to the curriculum of our institutions and especially the universities. if my research takes me well, and if it's true, many people, let me not say most, many people would rather pursue a diploma in some colleges and not in a university. I don't know how true is this, but I feel so. And actually, even here, before I even pose my question, there's some people who say this course kwanza, acha kwanza nimalize, alafu nikishamaliza ndo nitaanza kuielewa sasa. Now my question is, are our institutions, the higher learning institutions, the universities, too much on theories, on the theory part? Are they too much exam oriented and not, enhancing the skills and the practicality of our course? That brings me to the second question. Is our degree, for example, a degree that requires skills such as the media degree? Is it really losing value because, we're getting there without the skills, but we have the theory, too much theory in us, but we don't have the required skills to beat the competition out there? Thank you.
My name is Irene Anita. I'm a third year. I'm just seconding what Kahil has said. Mine is just a concern. It's true that most public universities, you say that when graduates go there, they say that we are not equipped. The reason is just there are more theories than practicals. It is not balanced.
Good afternoon. My name is Kadim Emmanuel. My first question bases on what Kahiro has asked, but let me just add some oomph to it. In curriculum review, what considerations are in place while doing the reviews? Because we find that in most of our institutions, the sessions are in theory. Some of my colleagues do say that while leaving Maseno, we live as philosophers more than media practitioners, because we don't literally have some sessions for the practical sessions. Looking at our course, it's communication and media technology with information technology. So we must have the technology squared in it because it is the most important thing given the maximum. Secondly, looking at cases of the curriculum and the job market, what relationship and how are we being equipped with the job market? While I was doing my attachment last year, I came to realize that my director was a third-year diploma student at Kenya Mass Institute. Look at the instance. He's a director because he can operate, do the TV production and everything. Our case here, we have a lot of studies in class. We don't have a lot of equipment to have everything in place. We are, in our class, for instance, we are around 150 people. Now, looking at the equipment available, are we going to scramble to have the enough space for every individual? Lastly, is there a way in which we can try and reduce, let me say there is some units that I always find it as a pressure cooker, because we find that, for instance, our second years currently, and I'm sorry to say this, we have some units that we must write it practically. You have an idea, you are so many people accumulated in a class, but there is no way you can convince an editor in Standard Media or Nation to come out with a certain article. So you feel like you have a pressure. You have the content, you have the pressure, but there is no way it can be accepted out there. So it's literally diminishing your self-esteem. You find that you can't do it in media, and then you lose hopes in everything. So is there a way that the curriculum can literally adapt itself into the job market? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we take that then.
Good afternoon. I'm Alois Michael. Mine, I'm going to back up what Kadima said. As a writer, and I'm grateful that the president, Churchill is here. When I was in attachment at the Radio Africa, the study newspaper Radio Jambo, actually it pained me because we had some student of journalism, but they couldn't write Swahili. The curriculum seems to give us theories in English, but when it comes to Swahili, you expect us to be perfect, go to field, because our radios zinataka Kiswahili. But here, you expect us to write good Swahili, speak good Swahili. I think it is time we have that discourse, because currently Swahili is an international language. I think the curriculum should incorporate, we have English for journalists, but there's no Swahili. Even if that one explains why in Kenya we only have one Taifa Leo, Radio Jambo and sites. We don't have many newspapers. Even the writers there, we get competition from those people taking linguistic and the so-called communication. Now they are giving us that competition. Yeah.
I think we take those questions and we'll come to, we'll have another round questions. But yeah, something from, do we have a radio station that is that the presenters use Kiswahili fully in Kenya? Which one? It's a mix, I think. Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a very good question. You was very, very pertinent, but also tough, questions. Now, the issue of measuring and specialization, if we can put it in quotes, the first person I think must be somebody. Wekesa asked, what education strategy should we use to make meet the market divide? I think that was repeated. Now, let me just emphasize one thing. Taking a major in print or broadcast, or some people call it electronic, or in digital journalism, whatever. That is a debate that has been going on for a long time. Some universities who had this kind of arrangement and then we passed. So sometimes it is not easy to have an answer. But I want to emphasize something that I emphasized yesterday, that I think what is important is for you to get what we call the fundamentals. And what I mean by this is that you as young people, I know, by the way, I know because I've experienced this. Having the exposure to technology, it will take you a very short time to you master how to, because a lot of the emphasis is put on the skills to operate the technology. But then you realize later on that skill is just the basis. A lot of the time it is how do you use that technology? Yes, you have the skill to operate it, but how do you operate it? And that you can practice, using gadgets that you've got access to. 150 students is huge. There are places where we have even more than that. At Multimedia, for instance, when we started, the students were not very many. They were exposed to good technology. But then they're expensive. For instance, at that particular time, a camera that will give you the kind of product that can go into a television, broadcast, is expensive. And we had a camera that would cost 600,000, 700,000. So yeah, this story. So one time we go to the showground, and our students are demonstrating stuff, and people know this kind of technology. Somebody looked at the camera and just felt like, no, I'm gonna have this camera. Whatever happens, I'll have it. By the end of the day, the camera was gone, and it was like, this is crazy. I think we had 2 or 3 of those, and usually we use them for the 3rd year, 4th year project production. But we then came to realize that the basics we're talking about can actually be practiced using, camcorders or DSLR. So the issue is, I'm even thinking there are some universities which sometimes require students who are doing IT